Hello everyone, this is Nitpicking Nerd, and I finally saw Avengers Endgame, and this is my first reaction, my thoughts and feelings on the movie. And I was a pretty big fan of all these movies, and because it makes it feel like a part of a bigger whole, that is more convoluted also, but I love that kind of stuff. I love convoluted continuity if it's done right. I did like all the time traveling stuff, that was fun, even though I would have to really nitpick it later when I rewatch the movie. I really want to analyze that part of it. And I didn't like that they insulted other time traveling movies. They basically named a whole bunch of movies about time travel and said that they are all bullshit and that's not how it's going to work. But then they never explain how is it going to work. So they do their own version of time travel, which I guess is like the multiverse way, meaning they go back in time, but it doesn't affect their own timeline. It's like a different universe, so they don't care about that other universe, even though in the end they do care about it. There's a bunch of inconsistencies with all of that. So I wouldn't say it bugged me because a lot of those scenes were very fun. They basically went back in time to previous movies and we got to see the same scenes from those movies but from a different perspective. And we saw them kind of tiptoeing around all of that, so that really reminded me of Back to the Future 2. One of my favorite parts of that movie was when Marty went back in time to that same time that he went to before and he saw himself from the side, and so all of that was really fun. So they did something like that, and they even used the opportunity to show us a bunch of stuff that happened as if in between in those movies. Like they filled a lot of gaps of stuff that happened in other places during those movies, so that was really fun. I really loved all those parts. And they brought up a whole bunch of cameos by all the actors who were in those previous movies, so that was really impressive. And it was very fun and funny, and there was a lot of hilarious moments, like the Hulk having to take the stairs down. So there was a lot of hilarious stuff, but logically, if we think about it, and I will probably analyze it later in detail, but didn't they mess up their own past? Like they changed things, Loki escaped because of them. I guess maybe Loki will appear again because of all of this. That was this movie's way to bring him back, I think, because he disappeared with the Tesseract. So wouldn't all of those events which they caused in the past, wouldn't that create a different future? So I guess it's all a different timeline now. Like when this whole thing was going on, I expected them to steal the stones without anyone knowing, and that way they'll be able to return them also without anyone knowing, so that would be fine. But instead they mess up so many things and the things happen differently, like Loki escapes and so many things went wrong because of what they did, so that means that future of that timeline will be totally different, which I guess was deliberate. That's one of their ways, I guess, to create a multiverse, and so in one of those timelines Loki will be alive in the future, so that's a way to bring him back. So I guess it was deliberate the way they did it, and it also allowed them to basically do whatever they want. So we had Captain America fighting himself and stuff like that, which was very fun. So I'm not really complaining, I'm just kind of wondering, so wait a minute, so how do you explain all of this exactly? So I guess it's multiverse, I guess it's multiple timelines, but if that's the case, why did they even bother to take back the stones there? So a bit fishy. And also, if Doctor Strange says that there's only one way to stop Thanos, and so that will be the reality that we saw, so that was the only reality in which he was actually defeated. So wouldn't giving the stones back to those other timelines actually enable Thanos in those other timelines to destroy half of them? So wouldn't it be better not to give them back? So it raises a whole bunch of questions, and again I will analyze that later, but in terms of pure fun, it was all very, very entertaining, so I'm not really complaining. One of the flaws of the movie, I think, was a whole bunch of kind of dramatic scenes in the beginning, all kinds of scenes that I think could have been shortened, could have been maybe even taken out, like Hawkeye and all that stuff is not really that interesting, so that's one of the things that really kind of bring this movie down, in my opinion. It has a lot of parts that I am sure a lot of people would skip if they rewatch this movie. They will just skip all those boring parts later, and so maybe it would have been a better movie if all those parts were kind of shortened a bit. In that sense, I think the previous movie, Infinity War, was actually better because I don't remember any part of it being boring at all. Every single moment of that movie was much more entertaining, in my opinion. So it had more entertaining moments overall. But this movie did have a few scenes, a few moments which were so good that I do think were better than the previous one and probably any of these movies. And especially toward the end when it really started getting epic. In that final battle, I think I really cracked up. It was beyond epic. Basically everybody showed up for the final battle, and that was so over the top, it was hilarious. Like I was laughing from that. I was just cracking up from how outrageous it was, how over the top it all was. And again, I'm not complaining, I totally geeked out at that moment, I had goosebumps, all of that, I loved that moment. It really reminds me of that scene in the movie The Professional with Gary Oldman. He said, I want everyone to come. And then someone asked him,
What do you mean, everyone?
so that line kind of popped in my head when I saw that scene in which basically every single character from all the other movies showed up for that final scene. So that was really, it was very satisfying. I wouldn't change anything about that scene. But when you really think about it, if someone who is not a fan of these movies watch this, just some casual moviegoer would stumble into the movie and see this, he would say to himself, what the hell is going on? What is this? And it was also like a computer game, especially that moment with Thanos kind of pointing his sword for his army and then the giant battle. It looked a little bit like a computer game, which is not the best thing. I love computer games. So I'm saying that in a good way. But for the casual audience, I'm not sure that would work. By the way, I didn't take my girlfriend to see this movie because she didn't see any of the previous ones and I knew she would not understand anything. So that's, I guess, can be used as a criticism against the movie because if you didn't see the previous movies, then you wouldn't understand anything at all what's going on in this one, especially with the time traveling, all of that. You'll be totally lost if you didn't see the previous ones. Even I felt a little bit lost, even though I did see every movie. And in the last scene, they would not know who the hell are all those characters. Like, I guess maybe it doesn't matter, maybe you don't have to know every single one of them, but if you do, then that's extra enjoyment for you because, it's like seeing a massive army, but every single soldier is someone you know from some movie that he had for himself, so that's great. So that definitely did feel very epic, and it did work because of all that massive build-up. It did work for the fans of the previous movies. I do think it was a great moment, even though it was a little bit over the top, but in a good way, in a funny way. And I love epic moments, I love stuff like that. It also reminded me of the movie 300, which I also was a fan of. Only the first one, not the second one, by the way, which was terrible, but the first one also was kind of set up as a kind of over-exaggerated, epic, over-the-top, a little bit silly, but in a good way, done very epically, and I love that, so it also reminded me of that, only that here every single soldier in that massive army was a character, a superhero that we knew. Which also reminds me something funny. There was a parody on YouTube. There's a channel called The Onion, which is making like satire videos, and they made a satire review of one of the previous Avenger movies, and they kind of made fun of the fact that every single character in the movie is a superhero, and that there is a shot in which the entire screen is only filled with superheroes, and that reviewer was complaining that they could have put even more superheroes on the screen. So that scene in this movie reminded me of that parody of the entire screen is full of superheroes, since they basically show like a million superheroes on the screen at once. So that's definitely kind of over the top completely, but in a good way. I loved it. And as for what was done with Thor, the whole joke about that he became fat, I did find it funny in the beginning. After a while, it was a little bit annoying that he kind of behaved like an idiot all the movie, maybe too much. So Thor was kind of the comic relief of the team, and I guess the leader was Captain America, and we had the scene of him using Thor's hammer, which I did like, but I thought it could have been done a bit differently. Like, we didn't actually see the moment in which he lifts it. Instead, we see him already using that, and that was a bit jarring in my opinion. I think it would have been better for us as the viewers to actually see that moment in which he tries to raise it and succeeds. I think it would have worked better. Instead, we kind of see someone throwing the hammer, and then it comes back to him and he catches it. So that was it was a bit too sudden, and the surprise wasn't necessary either. And then he starts using the hammer with all the powers that Thor once used. And I found that a bit strange as well, because didn't they say in previous movies, I think it was in Thor 3, Odin told Thor that he's the god of thunder, not the god of hammers, and that all that power was actually coming from him, and that the hammer was only meant to help him express that power. And so how exactly is Captain America using the hammer and producing all those powers from the hammer if that power came from Thor himself? Maybe it's because he was close by, so he was actually helping him out in that way. So maybe that's the explanation, but that's one of the things that kind of, those little inconsistencies that bug me a little bit. And also Captain America was able to stand toe to toe with Thanos. Even without the hammer, he was seemed to be able to stand his ground against him, and that also seemed a bit fishy because of the power levels we got to know from earlier movies. Again, this is a topic that I can nitpick. If I make comparisons of all the previous fights we've seen, Captain America wasn't as strong physically as Thor, for example, so how is he able to fight Thanos? And so maybe the hammer gave him some extra energy, I guess we can explain. And then there's that moment in which Captain America loses and he's totally beaten, but then he stands up anyway, and I kind of expected him to say once again, I can do this all day. Maybe he should have said that. Even if it was kind of repetitive, it would have worked, I think. It would have been fine. If every character has some kind of line that he always says, that's fine, that's funny. So before he can say that, we see all those gates opening up and basically everybody coming from all the movies, like all the superheroes. And then we see Thanos' face kind of in shock. It should have been more in shock, I think. That would have been even funnier. He should have really dropped his jaw completely. He kind of was surprised a little bit, but he wasn't scared. So I guess he's a good villain because, he's not a coward, because he still goes and fights them. Also, one of the reasons I think the previous movie overall was actually slightly better, for lots of reasons, but also because Thanos was actually a three-dimensional complex character and not pure evil, not just the bad guy who just wants to destroy everything for no reason. He was very charismatic in the way he talks and everything, and in this movie he was kind of more one-dimensional, so that's also kind of something that wasn't as good in this one. And in the end we have this giant fight between everybody, basically, which was very fun visually, one of the best things visually I ever saw, a lot of eye candy. And if you saw all the previous movies and you can recognize all these little characters, then that's great. It also reminds me of that movie Ready Player One, which was basically inside a computer game, and there was a lot of references to all kinds of other movies and other computer games, and a lot of characters showed up as a cameo from a whole bunch of different fandoms, and so it was really fun in that movie to recognize so many different things that we know from other places. So it was a little bit like that here, only here it's only from the Marvel movies, obviously, but still it was very fun to see so many of them, and it really feels like a summit, like a conclusion of everything that came before, so in that sense, it worked great. So I think that's probably was my favorite moment in the whole movie, when everybody showed up. That moment alone is worth watching it in the theater, I think. Also to experience the audience reactions to it and so on, that's not something you can do at home. So I definitely recommend going and seeing that movie in the theater. Is it the best movie ever? Probably not. Probably a little bit overhyped, mostly by fans of all of these movies, which I don't blame them. I also am a fan of them. But if someone is not a fan of superhero movies, probably he would not even understand what the hell is going on. He would be totally confused, and it might look like a computer game to him. But all the fans of previous movies would definitely love this one. So that's my opinion. Let me know what you think in the comments below and we can discuss it. And I will see you all next time. Bye bye.